$10 million. The words hung in the air between us, almost visible in their impact. The investment papers lay scattered across Aunt Marie's dining table, waiting for my signature. Diana stood frozen in the doorway, her perfectly tailored power suit suddenly looking out of place amid the casual family reunion atmosphere. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed, perhaps for the first time in her 57 years, finding herself genuinely speechless. Did I hear that right? She finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. 10 million? I met her eyes steadily, the years of her condescending remarks about my wasted potential playing through my mind like a bitter highlight reel. Yes, 10 million. Series A funding for WisdomWorks. I kept my voice neutral, though my heart raced with a vindication so sweet I could taste it. But she stammered, her worldview visibly crumbling before her eyes. A caregiver juggling elder care and grandchild duties? I finished for her, the pen hovering above the signature line. Funny how life works out, isn't it? Behind Diana, I could see the rest of the family watching our exchange with various expressions of confusion and curiosity. Only Robert, my husband, wore a look of quiet pride from where he stood across the room, our 10-year-old granddaughter Emma balanced on his hip. Judith, my best friend and beta tester, was practically vibrating with excitement beside him. Stephen Johnston, the tech investor who'd arrived just 30 minutes ago, stepped forward. The valuation is actually conservative, given the growth metrics. 25,000 active users in beta, 7,000 successful job placements, all without marketing spend. He glanced at Diana. Your sister-in-law has built something extraordinary. I watched as Diana's perfectly manicured hand moved to her throat, a gesture I'd seen countless times when she was processing something unexpected. How many family dinners had I endured her subtle jabs? How many backhanded compliments about how I kept busy between my mother's care routines and my granddaughter's homework? I don't understand, she said finally. How did you? I smiled, capping my pen. That's a long story. Would you like to hear it? Flashback 3 months earlier. The steam from my coffee curled upward as I sat alone at our kitchen table, the house quiet in the print darkness. My laptop glowed with lines of code. The only time I could work on my secret project was between 4:30 and 6 a.m., before my mother's care needs began and before Emma arrived for the day. At 53, I found myself in the position many women my age face, what sociologists call the sandwich generation, caught between caring for aging parents and supporting adult children and grandchildren. In my case, it was my 78-year-old mother with early-stage dementia and my granddaughter Emma, caught in the crossfire of my daughter's messy divorce. My eyes burned from lack of sleep, but the matching algorithm was finally functioning properly, connecting older professionals with remote opportunities that matched their skill sets and availability. 3 months of 4M coding sessions were paying off. You're up early again. I jumped slightly, turning to find Robert leaning against the doorframe, his professor's eyes curious behind his glasses. At 56, the silver streaking his temples only added to his distinguished appearance. Just working on the algorithm, I said, quickly saving my progress. The matching system still isn't quite right. He crossed to kiss the top of my head, peering at the screen. User count jumped again. Almost 8,000 now, I confirmed, allowing a note of pride to creep into my voice. The word-of-mouth growth is exceeding all projections. Robert poured himself coffee, settling into the chair beside me. Most people would have given up after what Diana said at Richard's retirement party last week. I felt my jaw tighten at the memory. Ah, I don't know how you do it sitting at home all day with your mother and Emma. I'd lose my mind, she'd said, voice dripping with condescension. Don't you miss having actual goals? Something that matters? I'm not most people, I replied, closing the laptop as I heard my mother's familiar shuffle down the hallway. And neither is your sister, unfortunately. Robert's expression softened. Diana's always been driven by external validation. It's all she knows. Easy for him to say. Diana wasn't his sister. She was mine by marriage only. The perfect corporate warrior with her corner office and relentless ambition. Every family gathering became another opportunity for her to remind everyone that I'd given up my career for caregiving. What she didn't know, what none of them knew except Robert and Judith, was that I'd spent the last 6 months building something that could change how people approach the work family caregiving equation altogether. My phone buzzed with a message from Judith. User count just hit 10,000. You're changing lives, girl. Who says 50 somethings can't disrupt an industry? I smiled, tucking the phone away as my mother appeared in the doorway, her nightgown slightly askew. At 78, her mind was increasingly betraying her, the early stages of dementia gradually erasing parts of her brilliant past. But her smile when she saw me remained unchanged. Good morning, dear. Is it time for breakfast? Almost, Mom. Let's get you dressed first. I exchanged glances with Robert over her head. He nodded, understanding that my workday had officially begun. Someday soon, Diana would understand exactly how I spent my days between medication schedules and school pickups. And I couldn't wait to see her face when she did. Flashback 5 years earlier. You're leaving? Seriously? Diana's perfectly shaped eyebrows arched high on her forehead as she stirred her martini. After all the work you put in to get to senior systems analyst? We were sitting at a rooftop bar downtown, celebrating, or rather, I was attempting to announce while she was refusing to hear my decision to take early retirement to care for my mother after her dementia diagnosis. The city lights sparkled below us, a view I'd once found exhilarating. Now it just reminded me of late nights at the office, deadlines that pushed everything else aside, the relentless pace that had once defined my success. The pace I was choosing to step away from, at least for now. It's not permanent, I explained, though I wasn't sure why I felt the need to justify myself. Just until we figure out Mom's care situation. Diana shook her head, disappointment evident in every line of her body. She was impeccable as always, designer dress, perfect makeup, not a hair out of place even at the end of a 12-hour workday. At 52 then, she'd just been promoted to executive VP at her firm, the oldest woman to hold the position. You know what permanent means in tech? 6 months. She set down her martini with unnecessary force. You'll be obsolete before your mother's condition stabilizes. The industry changes too fast. I know the risks, I said quietly. But some things are more important. More important than 20 years of building a career? Than breaking the glass ceiling? You know how hard it is for women our age in tech. You're just giving up? I remember the sting of her words, how they lodged themselves like splinters under my skin. What I didn't tell Diana that night was how I'd held my mother's hand as she asked me, for the third time in an hour, where my father was, not remembering he'd been dead for 12 years. How the idea of strangers caring for her in that vulnerable state felt like a physical pain. What I also didn't tell her, I'd already started sketching out the concept for what would eventually become WisdomWorks, an idea born in the sleepless nights after Mom's diagnosis. I saw so clearly the gap in the market, people like me who wanted both to care for family and maintain professional identity on their own terms. Look, Dinah softened slightly, misreading my silence as uncertainty. I get wanting to help your mother, but there are care facilities, in-home nurses. You don't have to sacrifice everything you've worked for. Maybe I'm not sacrificing, I said quietly. Maybe I'm just choosing differently. She sighed, signaling for the check. Your choice, your consequences. But don't come crying to me in 5 years when you can't get back into the industry. Nobody wants to hire a woman in her 50s with a 5-year employment gap. You'll regret this, Diana had said that night, collecting her designer purse. Throwing away everything you've worked for. I'd smiled tightly and said nothing. Some battles weren't worth fighting, yet. Walking home that night, I'd thought about my mother's words over the years. Systems can be changed, she'd always told me. Just because that's how things have always been done doesn't mean that's how they should be done. Her words had stayed with me, becoming the foundation of what would eventually become WisdomWorks, not just an app, but a revolution in how we valued work, both paid and unpaid, across generations. Flashback to Diana's childhood, what no one at that retirement party knew, what even I didn't fully understand until much later, was why Diana was the way she was. Years later, after everything changed between us, she confessed over tea at my kitchen table. How her father had walked out when she was 12, leaving her mother suddenly single with 3 children. How she'd watched her mother struggle to find work with an outdated nursing degree and a decade-long employment gap. We lost the house, she told me, fidgeting with her teacup. Mom had to move us in with Grandma. I remember wearing the same two outfits to school for an entire semester because we couldn't afford new clothes. She'd made a vow then, 12 years old and burning with determination. She would never be financially vulnerable, never depend on anyone, never put her career second. She'd clawed her way up the corporate ladder, fighting age discrimination and sexism at every turn. Each gray hair she meticulously covered was a reminder of how quickly women past 40 became invisible in the workplace. I thought I was saving you, she said that night, years after our confrontation. I thought I was keeping you from my mother's fate. You don't know what it's like to become irrelevant. But I did know. I'd felt it happen the moment I announced my early retirement to care for my mother. How quickly former colleagues stopped calling. How invitations to industry events dried up. How I became Margaret who used to be in tech instead of Margaret the systems analyst. Diana had formed her core beliefs about success and security during that childhood trauma, watching her mother struggle. It had shaped every decision she'd made since, including her marriage to Richard, chosen not for love but for the stability and social position he represented. But I didn't know any of this about Diana when our story began. I only knew the sting of her judgment, the weight of her disapproval, and my growing determination to prove her wrong. The late night coding session. The house was silent except for the soft clicking of my keyboard. 2:17 a.m., and I was still debugging the messaging system for WisdomWorks. Tomorrow, no, today, was Judith's final beta test before the alumni reunion next week. On the monitor beside me, user testimonials scrolled through a testing module. Just landed a senior project manager position while being home for my husband's cancer treatments every day. After 10 years out of the workforce caring for my parents, I thought my career was over. WisdomWorks matched me with a company that values my experience more than my employment gap. At 62, I was told I was overqualified for everything, code for too old. Through this platform, I found a startup that specifically wanted my decades of experience. My eyes burned with exhaustion, but satisfaction warmed me from within. This wasn't just code anymore. It was a lifeline for people who thought they had to choose between caring and contributing professionally. A floorboard creaked behind me, and I turned to find Emma standing in the doorway, her stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest. Bad dream, sweetie? I asked, pushing back from the desk. She nodded, crossing to me in the dim light of my desk lamp. At 10, she was at that in-between stage, still needing comfort after nightmares, but already showing glimpses of the young woman she would become. I dreamed about Mom and Dad fighting again, she said quietly, climbing onto my lap despite being almost too big for it now. My heart ached for her. The divorce had been finalized 2 years ago, but the emotional fallout continued. My daughter had moved to another state for a fresh start, leaving Emma with us during the school year, an arrangement that worked for everyone but still left a little girl missing her mother. They're not fighting anymore, sweetie, I said, stroking her hair. They're just living different lives now. I know. She leaned against me, her body warm and trusting. What are you doing, Grandma? It's super late. I considered how to explain it to a 10-year-old. Remember how Mrs. Rodriguez had to quit teaching to take care of her mother? Emma nodded. She was my favorite. Mom says she's really sad now. Well, I'm building a special bridge to help people like Mrs. Rodriguez find work they can do from home, so they can still be teachers or doctors or anything they want, but also take care of the people who need them. Emma touched the screen gently. Like you take care of great-grandma and me? Exactly, sweetie. Exactly like that. She studied the screen with surprising intensity. The buttons are kind of boring, she declared finally. They should be prettier. I laughed softly. You know what? You're right. Want to help me design better ones tomorrow? Her face lit up. Can I? Really? Absolutely. This project could use your artistic touch. Over her head, I watched a notification appear. Another successful job match. Another life changed. In that moment, holding my granddaughter while building something that mattered, I felt a contentment that no corner office could ever provide. Diana had it all wrong. This wasn't a retreat from success. It was a revolution in how we defined it, especially for our generation, caught between caring for aging parents and supporting adult children and grandchildren. At Richard's retirement party, Margaret, pass the champagne, would you? My mother in law asked, her voice cutting through the awkward silence that had fallen after Diana's latest dig. It's all about staying relevant, she'd proclaimed moments earlier, smoothing her expensive silk blouse. You can't just disappear from professional life and expect to matter, right, Margaret? I passed the bottle, acutely aware of Emma watching me from across the room. Children absorb everything, especially the subtle dynamics between adults. What was my granddaughter learning from watching her aunt repeatedly diminish her grandmother's choices? We were gathered at an upscale restaurant to celebrate Richard's retirement from his executive position, a milestone that seemed to be triggering Diana's anxiety about aging and relevance more than usual. Her husband caught my eye across the table with an apologetic glance. He'd long since given up trying to moderate his wife's behavior. Actually, Diana, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I've been thinking about what you said about getting back into the workforce. The conversation around the table halted. Even Robert's father, usually absorbed in his own thoughts, looked up with interest. Diana leaned forward, practically salivating at what she clearly thought was my surrender. Oh, finally ready to rejoin the real world? From the corner of my eye, I caught Robert's worried glance. He alone knew about the sleepless nights, the coding marathons, the growing user base of WisdomWorks. He alone understood what this moment might cost me. I thought about my own mother then, how she was losing her memories day by day, yet still occasionally offered moments of startling clarity. Just yesterday, watching me work on my laptop while Emma did homework, she'd patted my hand and said, "You always did know how to make more from less, Maggie." The traditional 9 to 5 isn't the only path anymore, I said carefully. There are so many ways to define success these days, especially for our generation. Diana's laugh was short and dismissive. Please, posting crafts on Etsy or babysitting other people's grandchildren doesn't count as a career. I felt something shift inside me, resolve crystallizing into determination. In that moment, I decided the university alumni reunion next month would be where I finally revealed what I'd been building. Where Diana would learn that sometimes the biggest achievements happen in the quiet moments between medication schedules and school pickups. You're right, Diana, I said, raising my glass to Richard. Crafts definitely aren't my thing. To your retirement, Richard, may we all find purpose in every stage of life. Under the table, my phone buzzed with another notification. User count just hit 15,000. The investment meeting. These numbers can't be right. Stephen Johnson leaned forward over my kitchen table, his Silicon Valley casual attire, expensive jeans, and a tech company pullover, at odds with his 62 years and the seriousness of his expression. 20,000 users in beta? With no marketing budget? I nodded, watching his investor brain recalculate in real time. I'd invited him for dinner partly because he was Robert's old college friend, but mostly because he was one of the most respected tech investors in the city, known for recognizing potential in overlooked markets. Word of mouth, I explained, refilling his water glass. Turns out, when you help someone find meaningful work that fits around their caregiving responsibilities, they tell everyone they know. From the living room came the sound of Robert helping Emma with her science project. My mother had been settled in bed an hour ago, her evening routine of confusion and agitation finally calmed with her medication. Stephen glanced toward the sounds of family life, then back at my laptop screen, displaying WisdomWorks' metrics. And you built this. Here? He gestured around our modest home. Between medication schedules and driving your granddaughter to soccer practice, I thought about the early mornings and late nights, the code written during my mother's nap times, the user interviews conducted at hospital waiting rooms and playground benches. I thought about Diana's LinkedIn post from yesterday, a 1,000-word manifesto about aging workers sacrificing their relevance for domestic duties. She tagged me in it. Success doesn't always wear a power suit, Stephen, especially not at our age. He ran a hand through his silver hair, eyes still on the screen. Margaret, this is exactly what we've been looking for. The senior and sandwich caregiver market is massively underserved, and your approach, it's revolutionary. He pulled out his business card, writing something on the back. I'm attending your alumni reunion tomorrow. Robert mentioned you're presenting there. After you've done your reveal, I'd like to discuss Series A funding. This number, he tapped what he'd written, is my initial thinking on valuation. I glanced at the figure, $10 million, and felt a momentary dizziness. Too low? Stephen asked, misreading my reaction. We can negotiate, of course. No, it's more than fair, I managed. I just didn't expect that your little project could be worth 8 figures. He smiled knowingly. Margaret, you've created something that could transform how an entire generation approaches work. That's worth investing in. My phone buzzed with a text from Richard. Diana's practicing her presentation in our living room. Keeps saying she's going to wake you up to your potential. Should I warn her? I typed back. Let her sleep on it. Some wake-up calls work better as surprises. The alumni reunion Diana's presentation. I'd like to introduce our next speaker, the reunion organizer announced, her voice echoing through the university hall. Diana Williams, Executive Vice President at Nexus Corporation, here to speak about breaking the age ceiling, staying relevant in a youth-obsessed market. Polite applause rippled through the gathering as Diana took the podium, resplendent in her designer suit, not a hair out of place despite being 30 years older than when we'd all graduated. I sat in the front row, my presentation materials ready for my slot immediately following hers. Thank you, everyone, Diana began, her voice carrying the practiced authority of someone accustomed to boardrooms. When I look around this room, I see the faces of people society is increasingly eager to discard. Her opening statement caught the audience's attention, many nodding in recognition. Age discrimination was something most of us had either experienced or feared. According to recent studies, Diana continued, clicking to her first slide. Workers over 50 are 45% more likely to remain unemployed long-term if they lose their jobs. For women, that percentage jumps to 63%. For the next 15 minutes, Diana outlined her strategy for age-proofing a career, continuous education, strategic networking, personal branding, and most importantly, never stepping back from career advancement for any reason. Every pause, she emphasized, every gap, every temporary break becomes a potential career ender at our age. The workforce doesn't wait, and it certainly doesn't welcome back those who've stepped away, especially women. Take my sister-in-law, Margaret, she continued, making heads turn toward me. Once a promising systems analyst, but she chose comfort over challenge, routine over growth. She gestured broadly in my direction. And now, in her 50s, she finds herself professionally irrelevant, caring for her mother and grandchild while the tech world moves on without her. I maintained a neutral expression, though my heart raced at being used as a cautionary tale. I cared deeply about Margaret, Diana continued, her voice softening in a way that might have seemed genuine to those who didn't know her well. Which is why I've been encouraging her to find ways back into the workforce before it's too late. Because the truth is, my phone vibrated with a notification from the app. Another successful job match, a former hospital administrator finding flexible work that allowed her to care for her husband with Parkinson's. The truth is, Diana's voice grew passionate. You can't have it all by hiding at home. You have to lean in, push forward, sacrifice. There is no path back once you've stepped off the career ladder. You must. Excuse me, Stephen's voice cut through as he entered, slightly later than planned. Sorry, I'm late. Did I miss anything important? Diana faltered slightly, her rhythm disrupted by the interruption. I was just explaining the importance of maintaining career momentum, especially after 50. Actually, I stood up, laptop in hand. Diana, would you mind if I shared something after your presentation, since we're on the topic of career choices for our generation? She blinked, thrown off script. I suppose that would be fine. For the next 5 minutes, I watched Diana conclude her presentation, her polish somewhat diminished by the interruption and my unexpected request. And that's why, she concluded, we must never settle for less than our full potential, no matter our age. Thank you. Polite applause followed as she sat down, shooting me a sympathetic look that clearly said she thought my impromptu addition would only prove her point. Your turn, Margaret. Perhaps you'd like to share your thoughts on returning to the workforce at our age. This was it, the moment when 5 years of early mornings, late nights, and quiet determination would finally be revealed. The alumni reunion and Margaret's revelation. The room quieted as my app's interface filled the screen. Clean, professional, powerful. The WisdomWorks logo glowed prominently at the top, with Emma's colorful, intuitive buttons arranged beneath it. "This is WisdomWorks," I began, my voice steadier than I expected. "A platform I built between medication schedules and helping with science projects. It helps talented professionals of all ages find meaningful work that fits their lives and caregiving responsibilities." I clicked to the next slide, showing the user growth chart. In just 6 months of beta testing, we've reached 25,000 active users and facilitated over 7,000 successful job placements. A murmur ran through the audience. From the corner of my eye, I could see Diana's expression shift from polite interest to confusion. "The problem WisdomWorks solves is simple," I continued, warming to my subject. "Our society treats caregiving and professional contribution as mutually exclusive, particularly for women our age. Step away to care for an aging parent or a grandchild, and you're labeled professionally irrelevant, as we just heard." Several heads turned toward Diana, who sat very still, her professional smile frozen in place. But what if that narrative is not just harmful, but fundamentally untrue? What if the experience and wisdom we've gained over decades of work and life actually make us more valuable, not less? What if the problem isn't with us, but with outdated work structures that fail to accommodate the reality of our lives? I clicked to the testimonials page, featuring professionals in their 50s and 60s who had found meaningful work through the platform. Dr. Jennifer Adams, 58, former chief of surgery, now provides remote medical consultations while caring for her husband with Alzheimer's. Mark Sullivan, 63, continues his 30-year accounting career with flexible hours that allow him to help raise his grandchildren after his daughter's deployment. "Wait," Richard interrupted, looking at Diana. "You built this while she was saying you were wasting your potential?" The question hung in the air, its implications clear to everyone. Diana's face flushed slightly. Sometimes, I met Diana's gaze directly. The biggest achievements happen quietly, without power suits or corner offices, especially for our generation, balancing career with caregiving responsibilities. The room erupted in questions. Our former biology professor wanted to know how the algorithm worked. Rachel, recently widowed, asked to sign up immediately. Through it all, Diana sat frozen, her presentation materials forgotten in her lap. "The most rewarding part," I continued, pulling up the statistics page, "is seeing people realize they don't have to choose between family care and ambition, between aging parents and professional contribution. Success isn't about where you work or how old you are. It's about the value you create." Incredible. Stephen stood up right on cue. "Margaret, this is exactly what I discussed with you yesterday. The market potential for the senior and sandwich generation demographic is enormous." "You knew about this?" Diana's voice cracked slightly as she addressed Stephen. "I had the privilege of seeing it last week," he replied. "In fact, I've already called my investment team. We're prepared to offer Series A funding of $10 million based on the current user growth and market potential." A collective gasp went through the room. $10 million was a figure that transformed what might have been dismissed as a little project into something undeniably significant. Emma chose that moment to climb onto the stage beside me. "Grandma, can I show everyone how I helped design the buttons?" The audience laughed warmly, and I hugged her close. "You were my best UI consultant, sweetie." Looking around the room at my former classmates' impressed faces, at Judith's triumphant grin, at Robert's loving smile, I finally met Diana's stunned expression. She opened her mouth to speak, but for once, had nothing to say. "The truth is," I said gently, "there isn't just one path to success, especially not at our age. Some of us will thrive in corporate settings, as Diana has brilliantly demonstrated. Others will find meaning in creating new systems that better serve our generation's complex needs. Neither path is wrong, they're just different." As the presentation concluded, people crowded around me with questions and congratulations. Through it all, I watched Diana slip quietly out of the room, Richard following close behind her. Sometimes the best response to judgment isn't a defense, it's a demonstration. The confrontation. I found Diana alone on the terrace outside the reunion hall, staring out at the campus where we'd both started our journeys 30 years ago. The evening air was cool, the setting sun casting long shadows across the quadrangle. Diana? I approached cautiously, unsure of my reception. She turned, and I was startled to see tears in her eyes, though she quickly blinked them away. Congratulations, she said, her voice carefully controlled. $10 million is quite the validation. Thank you. I moved to stand beside her at the railing, giving her space. It wasn't about the money, though. No? She gave a short, disbelieving laugh. What was it about then? Proving me wrong? The question was direct, challenging, but there was a vulnerability in it I hadn't heard from her before. At first, maybe, I admitted. Your comments hurt. For years, I felt judged every time we were in the same room. She nodded slightly, acknowledging the truth of this. And now? Now it's about creating something that helps people like me, like us. Women in their 50s and 60s who still have so much to contribute but need flexibility for the other parts of their lives. We stood in silence for a moment, watching students cross the quad with their backpacks and bright futures, unaware of the complexities that awaited them in midlife. I thought I was helping you, Diana said finally. Pushing you not to give up. I know. But I hadn't given up. I just changed direction. She turned to face me fully. Why didn't you tell me what you were working on? All these years, all those family dinners where I was. God, I was awful to you, wasn't I? You were, I agreed, but without rancor. As for why I didn't tell you, I guess I needed to prove it to myself first. And maybe I wanted that moment in there. I gestured back toward the hall, more than I'd like to admit. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. It was quite a moment. I've never been so thoroughly upstaged in my life. Diana sighed. My mother gave up her nursing career to raise us kids. When my father left, she couldn't get back in, not at the same level, not with a 10-year gap. She spent the rest of her life struggling, bitter about the choice she'd made. I'm sorry, I said, genuinely moved by the pain in her voice. That must have been difficult to watch. She used to tell me, never depend on anyone. Never put your career second. It became a kind of mantra. When you left Bennett Tech to care for your mother, it was like watching history repeat itself. I couldn't bear to see you end up like her. The admission hung between us, more honest than anything Diana had ever shared with me. In the fading light, with her professional armor momentarily lowered, I could see not the polished executive, but the 12-year-old girl who'd vowed never to be vulnerable. Our mothers shaped us both, I said softly. Mine taught me that systems can be changed. Yours taught you that women must adapt to survive within them. We've been living out those lessons our whole lives. Diana considered this, then nodded slowly. And now, with Wisdom Works? Now I'm trying to change the system to create a space where women like us don't have to choose between caring and contributing. Where experience is valued, not discounted. A notification chimed on my phone. Another successful match. A woman returning to work after caring for her elderly parent finding a VP position that let her maintain her caregiving role. I showed Diana the notification. Every time this happens, I think about all the talent and wisdom that would otherwise be lost. And if I'm being honest, every time you criticize my choices, you push me to make this platform better. In a strange way, your judgment helped create something that's actually changing lives. To my surprise, Diana's eyes welled up again. I was so cruel to you. You were scared. I corrected. Scared that if someone could be successful without following your path, maybe all your sacrifices weren't necessary. Inside, we could hear the reunion continuing, voices and laughter floating out to the terrace. Robert would be wondering where I was. Stephen was probably looking for me to finalize the investment details. What happens now? Diana asked, a question that seemed to encompass more than just the immediate future. I took a deep breath, making a decision. WisdomWorks needs someone to head our corporate partnerships division. Someone who understands both worlds, traditional corporate culture and the need for change. Someone who knows firsthand the challenges facing women our age in executive positions. Diana stared at me, understanding dawning. Are you serious? After everything I've said and done, Who better to convince old school companies to embrace flexible work than someone who's lived both sides of the story? I smiled. Besides, I heard from Richard that you've been reconsidering your next career move. She gave a startled laugh. He told you that? He's worried about you, Diana. Says you're working 80-hour weeks, missing family events. That doesn't sound like success to me, it sounds like a trap. She was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the campus that was growing darker as the sun disappeared. I'm tired, she admitted finally. I've been tired for years. Then maybe it's time for a change. The position is fully remote, competitive salary, equity options. You could even work from the lake house if you wanted. The lake house? Diana laughed, a genuine sound I rarely heard from her. I haven't taken a vacation in 3 years. Exactly my point. The signing present day. And that brought us back to this moment, in Aunt Marie's dining room, the investment papers spread before me, Diana watching with a mixture of awe and regret as I prepared to sign. $10 million, she repeated softly, pulling out the chair across from me. I still can't believe it. Stephen smiled from his position near the window. The valuation is likely to increase substantially once we take this out of beta. Margaret's created something revolutionary. I signed my name with a steady hand, making official what had begun in those pre-dawn hours at my kitchen table. A platform born from necessity, nurtured through determination, and now poised to transform how an entire generation approached work and caregiving. That's it, Stephen said, collecting the signed papers. Congratulations, Margaret. You're officially the founder and CEO of a $10 million company. The room burst into applause. Family members who had gathered to witness this moment, including Robert, Emma, and Judith. Even my mother was here, having a relatively good day, though she wasn't entirely clear on what we were celebrating. Speech. Someone called, and I found myself standing, overwhelmed by the journey that had led here. 5 years ago, I began. I made a choice that many people. My eyes flickered briefly to Diana, saw us giving up. I took early retirement to care for my mother as dementia began taking her memories, and later to help with my granddaughter after my daughter's divorce. It was the right choice for me, but it came with consequences, including the loss of professional identity that so many caregivers experience. I paused, looking around at the faces of those who had supported me through this journey. WisdomWorks was born from that experience, from the recognition that our system forces impossible choices on caregivers, particularly women. It demands that we choose between caring and contributing professionally, as if we can't possibly do both. But we can. We do. Every day, thousands of experienced professionals are proving that with the right structure, the right opportunity, we can honor both our caregiving commitments and our professional capabilities. I gestured to Emma, who beamed with pride. My granddaughter designed the interface buttons that users love so much. My husband Robert supported every late-night coding session and early morning breakthrough. My friend Judith created our branding and tested every function. Even my mother, I smiled toward her, though she looked slightly confused, contributed with her lifetime of wisdom about changing systems that don't work. Finally, I looked at Diana, who sat quietly watching me, a complexity of emotions in her eyes. And today, I'm pleased to announce that Diana Williams will be joining WisdomWorks as our new Chief of Corporate Relations, bringing her extensive executive experience to help companies recognize the value of flexible work arrangements for experienced professionals. A murmur of surprise went through the room. Diana stood, moving to join me at the front. She looked different somehow, still elegant, still polished, but with a softness I hadn't seen in years. It's true, she confirmed, her voice steady. After 30 years in traditional corporate environments, I'm excited to help reshape how companies view experienced professionals, particularly those with caregiving responsibilities. She turned to me, a genuine smile breaking through her professional facade. Margaret has shown me that there are many paths to significance, and that sometimes the most important innovations happen not in corner offices, but at kitchen tables between caregiving duties. The celebration continued as Stephen discussed next steps with potential investors who had gathered for the occasion. Emma proudly demonstrated the app interface to anyone who would look. Judith and Robert served refreshments, moving through the crowd with easy hospitality. I found myself standing beside my mother, who was having one of her increasingly rare lucid moments. You did it, she said, patting my hand. You changed the system. I'm trying to, I replied, throat tight with emotion. She nodded toward Diana, who was engaged in animated conversation with several attendees. And you helped her too. That's important, Margaret. Systems can't change unless people do. Epilogue is 6 months later. And that's why today I'm announcing the WisdomWorks Foundation, a $50 million initiative to help people over 50 start their own flexible businesses. The conference hall erupted in applause as I stepped back from the podium. In the front row, Emma sat between Robert and Judith, giving me 2 thumbs up. My mother had passed away peacefully in her sleep 3 months ago, a loss that still ached deeply, but had also brought a certain peace. Her values and wisdom lived on in the platform that was now changing tens of thousands of lives. Beside me on stage stood Diana, not in a power suit, but in a casual blazer over jeans, her new signature look as our chief of corporate relations. The past 6 months had transformed her nearly as much as they had transformed WisdomWorks. 6 months ago, Diana began, taking the microphone. I stood in front of my college classmates and preached about traditional success. I was wrong, dead wrong, and being wrong changed my life. She clicked to the next slide, showing her viral LinkedIn post, not the one condemning caregivers, but her confession that had since been shared over 1 million times. How my sister-in-law revolutionized work for the sandwich generation while I wasn't looking. From corporate warrior to flexible work advocate, Diana's transformation had been as surprising as it was complete. The woman who once defined success by corner offices now led our corporate outreach, convincing traditional companies to embrace remote work and flexible schedules for employees with caregiving responsibilities. Working with WisdomWorks has given me the opportunity to reconnect not just with my professional purpose, but with what matters most, Diana continued. My husband and I now live at our lake house where I work remotely 3 days a week. For the first time in 30 years, we're rediscovering why we married in the first place. As we concluded our presentation, Emma ran up to the stage. Grandma, show them my new button designs. The audience laughed warmly as I pulled up the interface. See this feature? My granddaughter designed it. Because true innovation doesn't care how old you are or where you work, it only cares about making things better. Afterward, as we mingled with attendees, Diana pulled me aside. Remember when I used to mock you for wasting your potential? She asked. Hard to forget, I smiled. Thank you, she said simply, for not just proving me wrong, but for showing me a better way to be right. Outside, the summer evening was perfect. Emma skipped between Diana and me, chattering about new button colors for the app's next update. Judith and Stephen debated foundation initiatives for supporting elder care innovation. Robert discussed history with a university dean interested in flexible teaching arrangements for senior faculty. You know, Diana said as we walked toward the waiting cars, my mother would never have believed this was possible, that I could have both a significant career and a meaningful personal life at our age. It's what the next generation deserves, I replied, watching Emma run ahead. Choices that don't feel impossible. Diana nodded thoughtfully. The best legacy we can leave them. In the months since my mother's passing, I thought often about her repeated insistence that systems could be changed. In her final lucid moment, she'd squeeze my hand and whispered, You did it, Maggie. You changed it. Whether she meant the system or her daughter-in-law remained unclear, but perhaps the answer was both. WisdomWorks had grown to over 100,000 users, with a waiting list of companies eager to access our pool of experienced professionals. The investment had expanded to $50 million after a second funding round, validating our model and enabling the foundation that would help others create flexible businesses. More importantly, thousands of people like me, sandwiched between caring for aging parents and supporting adult children and grandchildren, had found a way to remain professionally relevant without sacrificing their caregiving commitments. As our small group reached the cars, the setting sun painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, I felt a profound sense of completion. Not because the work was done, it was just beginning, but because the journey had come full circle. The platform created in stolen moments between caregiving duties had become a bridge for others walking the same path. The sister-in-law whose judgment had once stung so deeply now stood beside me as a partner and friend. And the mother whose wisdom had inspired it all would have been so proud to see systems finally beginning to change. Ready to go home? Robert asked, car keys in hand. Home, where Emma would be spending the night, probably insisting on ice cream and a late bedtime to celebrate. Where Diana and Richard would join us for dinner, their rekindled relationship a reminder that it's never too late for new beginnings. Yes, I said, taking his hand. Let's go home. As we drove away, I thought about success and its many definitions. Diana had once measured it in corner offices and executive titles. I had found it in the quiet moments between caregiving duties, in code that bridged worlds, in a platform that valued the wisdom that comes with experience. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just proving someone wrong. It's inviting them to join you in building something right.